Then, if you'd like to.
Sure. So now thank you again, Monique, for this brilliant presentation. I would request all the participants to go through these two questions which are there on the screen. The first one mentioning the current challenges, symptoms, and all the experiences that they've had so far with in their personal lives, within the organization, as well as anybody whom they know, and all the challenges and future recommendations also, which they would want to give for either their organizations or any particular group. So I would request all the participants to come forward and share their own inputs, their own experiences.
If people are hesitant to start, I'm quite happy to start, and I'll just say I worked for many years in a sanctuary setting, not in Asia, and now I work in a different capacity in animal protection, and everything you're describing is very, very familiar, and I'm sure it is to everybody here. It's interesting. I've never really looked into compassion fatigue much, but sort of differentiating between burnout and compassion fatigue is an interesting thing that I've never thought about much. Also differentiating between those types of things and people who just experience a lot of anxiety and other sorts of things like that as well. They're all tied up in one big knot, I imagine. One of the challenges that I think a lot of organizations probably face is when organizations are so small, they might have a great desire to implement something that deals with compassion fatigue, but just don't feel they have the time or resources to do it, which probably exacerbates the problem. That's all.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Coming from such an organization, it's, as I said before, it's really hard to be able to say to, everyone, oh, just work at your own pace and work from home when you feel like it, as long as these are getting done. But then
this meeting is being recorded.
Oops. But again, as you go through the week and trying to connect with people and so on, it's very difficult to know when you've got responsibilities and you've got a program, and then you've got animals to feed and all these different responsibilities as an organization, and your main focus sometimes gets too much on the animals and doing everything and anything, that you may not see as much of what's going on with the people that are working with you, that you really need to factor something in, even if it's just those meetings. I think that makes a huge difference. Just spending time together outside of work maybe, and having a little downtime, those kind of things. It doesn't cost a lot, but as an organization, you acknowledge that this is tough, and we're all doing things at different paces. So that's something that I think every organization can do. And yeah, if it's a retreat, it doesn't have to be expensive. Like sometimes you can just go next door and sit in the park together and play with the dogs or something like that, and talk to each other, have fun. I think we don't do enough of that.
Thank you, Monique, for those brilliant ideas, and thank you, Brooke, for sharing. Anyone else who would like to share about their experience so far?
I might just want to say something. Yeah, and thank you, Monique, very much for the presentation. And there's a lot of information for us all to digest today. And I think the first thing we all need to recognize is compassion fatigue is real, and it's impacting our mental health like a lot, especially in organization or in work where we do like campaigns or projects that with their deadlines to be met, and there are a lot of pressure. And especially we are working on behalf of the animals who have no voice, and acting on behalf of them. My question is like, what do you think it's the possible scenarios when for us to make it like real, more to get more attention from NGOs and from the world, and to because to help, because there are many people in our career and who are needing help as well in their daily life, and it's when we talk the animal welfare is our priority, but in the same time we also want to take care of our colleagues as well and our staff. So what are your suggestions to make this go further? Thank you.
Okay, again, I'm answering as a layperson from experience. So if for example, there are staff, for example, that are feeling pressure, perhaps any of the symptoms or feelings that come with the work, give them the space so that they can discuss it. But if it's talking about an NGO, for example, if you need to work at a certain time from home because you just can't get there, or one of the family's sick or things like that, that will relieve the pressure of the strict guidelines. If you can't, I mean, we're working in a country where there are strict guidelines about work, but things are starting to become more fluid. We're still dealing with that as an organization. How can we become more fluid? But it's something that you need to start discussing as an organization. So I think the first thing is perhaps you could share information about compassion fatigue, burnout, vicarious trauma at a meeting, perhaps if you're one of the staff or a volunteer, and perhaps suggest that show them that these are some of the things that you're concerned about, and discuss how you could maybe do something together. Even if you're sharing this kind of thing within an organization, and bearing in mind that the organization might have limits to how much they can spend on this sort of thing or the time they can share, at least you're discussing it and together trying to work out a solution. I think the communication thing is key for organizations. Now, for the world, for the sector, I think doing more studies on this. I don't think there's many studies at all about this in Asia, and something that we found from the pilot project is that there are those extenuating circumstances that make it. So if you read about the problems within the veterinary sector, and then you imagine the animal care sector as a whole, and then come back to Asia where we've got even further, and it doesn't have to be just Asia. I think there's other regions in the world that have similar situations to some of the countries in Asia. And then there's other countries in Asia that don't have the same similarities. Yeah, Asia is so broad. But you could start with maybe your country, and this is something that we're going to address in the SOS project, is that we want to bring together the people in our region and present this to them that are working in the sector. For example, in the psychology sector, in the care sector for humans, yeah, and also for the veterinary sector, and any kind of sectors. For example, like this Asia for animals, you're acknowledging that this is a thing by having this webinar. So that already is spreading the word that actually we need to incorporate strategies also when we're thinking about starting a new period, a new project, a new plan. Factor these things in, and it could be within your planning for your local organization, or it could be in the region. Yeah. What kind of help is out there? And yeah, this is one of the reasons why we're doing the toolkit and this thing, so that we can help within the region, not just in the country or the organization. So hopefully that's given you a couple of answers to your question, Tan.
Yep, that's great. Thank you to Monique.
Thank you, Monique. Yes, I do understand that communication is always a very important key to all kind of issues and concerns if we want to find resolutions together. I see Sarita has raised her hand. Sarita, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you. So I do have a question. You somewhere during your presentation, you talked about unwilling to care as a trauma response. I want to understand more about it, because I think I have observed this in my own self, that with helplessness and guilt, there comes a desire to not look in the direction of cruelty or something that I feel it's beyond my power to do something about. I completely, entirely try to, shut myself off of it. So I do want to understand more about this.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a professional, but this is something that happened to me as well. And yeah, okay, you can take it back to when you're actually in the traumatic situation. And for example, you're in a factory farm, you're seeing all of this horrible, horrible stuff, and you have to walk away. But you would like to just rescue them all. But you have to walk away. And then those eyes, the animals that you see, whenever you see a picture of something like that, it brings back that trauma. So these are things I think that are quite significant trauma, and that needs to be talked about. One thing that we had in our mental health sessions were some professionals in the region. They're not strictly, they're not animal care psychoanalysts, but they are trauma psychoanalysts. And I think a lot of it crosses over. So they're mainly working with people with person-to-person trauma, I guess. But this is personal trauma that has a very similar effect on you and how you deal within this world. So I would suggest that you do reach out and just talk to someone that has some background in that can give you some strategies. I can't really help you with specific strategies, but the strategies that help for me is the one that we just looked at before. I still I'm dealing with it because it's like almost every day that you have to deal with it. So what are the things that will help you get through that initial trigger thing? And I think that last is very good, because it's if I understand what you're saying, it's something that is very, very worrying, because you feel guilty about it. Yeah, you feel guilty about not looking anymore and not, being strong enough or something like that. That's how I feel, And I think we need to tell ourselves that we can't save every single one, and that this is going to continue, and that it does happen. But we're all part of a group that is doing something towards that. And it may not be happening immediately, but we are working together as a movement to do something. And that's all we can really do. We cannot stop all the trauma. And I think if we keep telling us those things, reassuring ourselves that we're allowed to feel this, and it is trauma, and just take it back and say, we're doing okay. But if you've got that feeling again, please, I think it's the best is to speak to a therapist and let them talk you through it on how you can deal with those feelings. Because I think that would be my recommendation as a layperson, but someone that has experienced it and continues to experience it. Yeah, something that you have to deal with and find strategies for. Does that answer your question, Sarita?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Monique.
And I hope, it is something that we all feel, most of us, and we feel like we're doing it alone and we feel guilty. But I know that we're all to some extent feeling that. Yeah. So I think that alone helps us when we're in a regional group like this to know that we're all together in this. Yeah. And it's not just isolating. We are together and we should talk about it. So thank you, Sarita, for being so sharing and honest. That was great. Thanks.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you so much for that answer. Yes, I can totally relate to what Sarita has just asked. In fact, even at times when we talk to a therapist or somebody who's an expert, we have this in our mind that the compassion fatigue that we get when we are working alongside animals is entirely different from any other type of compassion fatigue that usually happens in other sectors, because we see a lot of help going there in different other sectors. But for this particular sector, it's just people are now acknowledging it. So it may take some time, but being with people or being around people who are of similar, who are like-minded, who are also going through certain different issues, helps us all to grow together at times and makes us feel understood. Thank you so much. Stuti, I see that you also have want to share something.
Yeah, thank you, Shweta. So something that I wanted to share was from my personal experience of, another kind of a compassion fatigue, where what usually happens is, especially when we work with farmed animals versus a lot of people, organizations who work for companion animals. So, there is this confusion that goes on in our minds as well, that the people who are trying to help the companion animals are the same people who may be consuming the farmed animals that we are trying to save, protect, spread awareness about. So even we know that we are helping one group of animals or one category probably of animals. But even while working with those people, there is this fatigue which goes on in our minds of having to accept that they may be, consuming the other set of animals that we are also working towards helping. So it's just a very like exhausting situation probably, where we have to accept and go against something that we strongly believe in.
Yes, it's a really valid and very common thing that's happening, I think, especially in the sectors like ours, where we're working with domestic animals, we're working with farmed animals or for farmed animals, we're working for exploited, that's the word I couldn't remember before, exploited animals, and working animals and wild animals. So you may have a sector that's working on these animals within your organization, but then, they may be of the view that, well, they're farmed animals, so you can eat them. They haven't got to that connection yet, and it's quite normal in this situation. And then when you bring forward education or public outreach on farmed animals, a lot of the domestic animal supporters that you had will get upset because they have, because they're eating farmed animals, and they thought it was okay because that's what they've always done and nobody said anything and it's normal. And then these same people that we've been supporting and everything are now saying, well, you can't eat those animals. And then they're saying, well, just stay with the domestic, don't worry about the others. And you get that cross section of guilt. Also, you don't know where to draw the line when you're doing public outreach. Should you keep going or should you pull back? And then that creates guilt in itself because you know which way you want to go, but you can't. Things like that. I don't know if I'm making myself very clear here, but I think what you were saying, Stuti, is that there's like this challenge in your head that domestic animals are seen as something that you should fight for, but not farmed animals in the general public in Asia. Yeah. And so how do you bring those two together? again, it's a lot of it is education, public outreach to the public outreach to the people you work with, your families, and continue having that dialogue of what's the difference between the two animals? You know, why is this okay and why isn't that? And so on. And again, it's something that can cause burnout because you can't have a quick result. It's going to take years and years. So yeah, I think it's something that it's something you have to keep discussing and continue with the public outreach, and know that more public outreach is going to change public view the more we continue. So if that's something that you're dealing with, I think it's more about continuing discussing and doing public outreach to educate that all animals are sentient beings. And it's working, like slowly it's working in Indonesia. And that, then again, this is another point about how you can get back to yourself when you get down so much, down from all of these triggers and abuse and exposure. You can look at the things that are making a difference and get that and take that on as we are doing it, making a difference. We are there. It may be slow, but there are differences. And I think that goes back also to your personal one. When you have these trigger moments, acknowledge, listen, acknowledge, or accept, find a small step strategy, and then that will calm and then lead on to the next one. So when you've got that in your head, of the two opposing sides, but still animals, you can take that on, perhaps. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Monique. Well, I have a question now. Is there anything that we can do for someone who we think is going through compassion fatigue, but not accepting it, but we can see that there are symptoms, that the person is somewhat dealing with something, but we can't go directly and tell them? So what can be done in such a case?
Maybe, as I said, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not sure, but things that would help perhaps is to, it's really hard because it depends on the people. If they're like gung-ho, working, and you understand that they're not taking time out to rest, they're not taking time out to eat or drink, and you want to help them, but every time or perhaps you want to do something together, but it feels like you're giving them more pressure, because then they think, oh, I've got to spend time with you because I don't have time because I'm doing this. It's a really fine line. I would like to say that every case would be different and it depends on the type of person. Perhaps just opening discussion of how you're doing, you know, that kind of thing, and just talking and saying that you're there for them. If you need anything, maybe invite them out for a coffee, and if it's at a time when, or a juice, if it's at a time when they are at a stress moment, I wouldn't suggest it, because that will create more stress, because then they think that, oh, I'm letting you down because I can't have a cup of coffee with you, you know. So take that into account. Find a time when perhaps that person has a break in between stressful situations, and then invite them and sit down, or you know, that kind of thing, I think would be the best help in that situation at that moment. To suggest that they go and see a therapist or something like that, I don't think that would help. I think it's more about understanding and finding ways to support them so that they can relieve some of that stress. Yeah. Perhaps somebody else has got better ideas. Remember, I'm not an expert. So I would really like other people to be able to answer and respond as well, not just me, if that's possible.
Sure. Anyone who has inputs, please do share here. And Elliot has
yeah,
also.
I've got a couple of things. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think all the points you've touched on are really, really important. And I think that's like within organizations, creating an atmosphere that it's okay to look after yourself. I've seen a couple times completely, sorry, I get a little bit jittery on this topic. I've seen it a couple of times in my work where people completely fallen apart and had complete breakdowns. And through that, they're not able to help animals anymore. So I think organizationally, I think everyone, it's very hard to have those conversations with someone uniquely, but if you can create an environment where you go, it's not selfish to look after yourself. You know, you need to be able to look after yourself so that you can look after others. Because I've seen so many times people keep pushing and pushing and pushing themselves because they think their suffering is secondhand. You know, there's animals out there suffering, there's other people within the team that's suffering, and that person in the middle has to often be that person that holds it together for everyone. So I think it's really important to, create that environment within organizations. And similarly, like a lot of organizations can be quite internal, you know, everyone's going through these awful things, frustration, suffering, and often team members within that team can't take on any more, you know, they don't have the additional capacity to take on also. So I think it's also really important, whilst breeding this environment that's supportive, to also find those things outside of your workplace, you know, whether it be a friend, whether it be personal activities, yoga, meditation, whatever, that help you get through it as well. You know, find that thing that works for you. And speaking from personal experience, you just got to keep going until you find those mechanisms and those things that, you know, how you can manage your own mental health. And I think you've said it perfectly, Monique. You know, at the end of the day, it is, you know, you got to care for yourself to care for others. And I think that's the most poignant point that you've said today. And it's okay to not be okay.
Thanks so much, Elliot. That was really great insight. And I think that a lot of us can relate to what you've said about either ourselves or people that we know within our organizations, or maybe not even in an organization, but working within, perhaps they're just an individual that's trying to do the best they can and spending all their money and doing everything they can to save animals, but they're falling apart, or they just can't cope anymore. And we need to identify, acknowledge those people within our organizations and support them, you know, and whatever way it is, we have to at least acknowledge. And then personally, we have to say it's okay to take a break. Like, and this is something that I battle with all the time, you know, like just stop and stop the thoughts and just focus on something else, even if it's just for a few hours. Just stop, focus, relax, do something that will make you feel that you're not at that anxious level all the time. And you need to do that. The only way you can do that is to help yourself get into a routine of doing it. It just can't happen like that, because you're already on this like a train and doesn't want to stop at the stations. You have to stop at the stations, get off, look around, have a break, and then get back on the train. But at least you'll be a little bit more level-headed. You'll be able to think better because you've had a break. And yeah, exactly. You have to give yourself the permission to take a break. And yeah, that's the best thing that I can think of.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Monique. Anyone else, if they have any inputs or any question? Have spoken about a lot of points here in a very small presentation. I'm sure the information and knowledge that you shared today is vast. You've spoken about the factors, the symptoms, the challenges, how challenges differ in different countries and continents as well. And you be right now, while speaking about the personal concerns, issues, organizational concerns and issues, we've seen that a lot of issues can be probably managed if a dialogue is there between two people, or if there are organizations which make space for sharing of these things, and they normalize it. It's not looked upon as something which is separate from the normal working. So that will also help a lot of compassion fatigue, people suffering from compassion fatigue. It'll help them to share and to at least feel like a part of normal, everyone, like public, not somebody who's like outside struggling every day with their work and for animals. So I think we would, if there are no more questions or no more inputs, before we close this call, Monique, are there any future recommendations that you would like to share?
I think most of the things that I've said, organizations try and factor these considerations in for your staff and volunteers as well, and for yourselves. I think a lot of organizations, small organizations, have people like that are working on the ground nonstop, and because they're responsible for the organization, they need to also factor that in. For larger organizations, factor it into your budget. Make sure you've got some team building activities. Make sure you have some, maybe even a retreat, maybe provide, you know, a yoga session or a sports session or anything that's active that will take take your mind away from the actual work. I think that's a big thing, is like do something away from the work that can reset that flight and what is it called? Fight or flight mode, because that's what we're in. We're in fight flight mode all the time. We either want to run away because we can't take it anymore, or we want to just fight them. Stop that and reset and let it work for you when it has to. But the rest of the time, you should come back from that and be able to live a good life while helping the animals to the best of your ability and still looking after yourself within the organization.
Yes. I think we can go to the last slide and share your email ID. I would like to know more about the SOS Project. I'm sure there are people who would like to write to you.
I think I'm no longer sharing the screen, so somebody else has to do that. But I can type it in the chat if you like. So subject SOS to I'm just typing it in, and I'm very slow. Okay, so just subject SOS project to Animal Friends Jogja at gmail.com or to me, indomuse@gmail.com. Thank you. And yeah, we hope in the next couple of months it should be ready. I'm not sure if Dr. Emily's here. I don't think so. She was having trouble with the internet. So soon we will be doing the third gathering, which is for the academics, vets and so on. And then after that, the toolkit will be published.
Sure. Thank you so much for this such insightful session.
Thanks.
And I wish everyone a very good day ahead, a good evening ahead, a good weekend ahead. Thank you once again. And thank you, HM Animals, for having this wonderful session as a part of the entire event. Thank you. I will end the session here right now. Thank you so much.